All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Smith. I'm the biologist program manager here at the department. I'm over the data management section and one of the crew that leads the Creel program. So tonight I'm going to give you a much needed informational meeting about Creel. We're going to learn basically a brief history of Creel, the purpose methodology behind it, how we arrive to our estimates, how our survey sites are selected, the difference between our private angler and charter surveys, why we have a two-part survey, why we have dockside and effort, where the angler can find these survey results and give you some examples. And then when we're done, you're going to be able to ask us questions. All right, so let's get into the Creel history. So why Creel? Before Creel started, we were part of the NOAA program, MRIP, which was the Marine Recreational Information Program. We had a lot of issues with those landings. We had an inability to rely on those estimates at a basin or sub-state level. We had insufficient sample size, so our catch per unit effort, size, frequency, age data, we just weren't getting what we wanted. Estimates of angler participation, so that effort far exceeded what our license frame looked like. We had imprecise landing estimates for many of our species, particularly our offshore species. And then our landings estimates just were not in timely. We couldn't do in-season monitoring because everything was on a 2-month wave system. And sometimes we wouldn't get those for another 2 months after. So we really needed more precise, real-time, localized data to better manage our state fisheries. We made several requests to NOAA to enhance that. We were never really granted these requests, so we decided in 2014 to do our own program. And this is just going to give you a visual view of that timeline. So, as I said a minute ago, we had a lot of issues with our offshore landings and those estimates that we would get. So one of the first things that kind of started this was yellowfin tuna. In 2011, we developed the offshore landing permit, that ROLP, with yellow tuna in mind to kind of help us get better reporting requirements. And we required that for all of our tunas, billfish, and swordfish. In 2012, rulemaking was done to add more of the reef fish, so groupers, hinds, snappers, except for gray snapper, to that ROLP. In 2013, I don't know if any of you remember that we did quota monitoring for red snapper. It was a very intensive survey that we did where we used kind of our Creel style to start managing that species. We did in-season monitoring of it. And then that same year, we added gray snapper, wahoo, cobia, and dolphin fish to the ROLP. Then after quota monitoring, we decided in 2014, because we were not getting what we needed from MRIP, that we were going to start our own program. Creel covers all saltwater species, not just red snapper. In 2015, we worked with NOAA to try and benchmark our program. We basically worked side by side. We did 2 surveys at one time. We had MRIP going and we had Creel going at the same time. The importance of doing this is to be able to calibrate the Creel estimates to be used in the time series in the past. That way, once Creel is there, it's done, you can use that data as landings estimates, and it can be used for stock assessments. In 2016, we had an intensive review with some national experts in statistical survey design. They looked at our program. They talked to us about some things we needed to do to it to make some adjustments to make Creel better. We implemented a lot of those that they talked to us about to make our program stronger. Some of those, like a target question or some discards collected during dockside, are some examples of those. Then after that intensive review and several meetings back and forth with NOAA, our program was officially certified in 2018. And so now Creel estimates are the official landings estimate for Louisiana and are suitable for inclusion in stock assessments for those federal species. And our most recent addition is in 2021, we added gray triggerfish to our landing permit. So now that I've given you kind of that brief timeline, let's go ahead and dive into our program. So the purpose of Creel is to provide statistically significant recreational fishery information to aid in management of Louisiana's valuable fishery resource. The saltwater component of this recreational fishery encompasses state waters, including marsh habitat, bays, beaches, and nearshore areas, as well as the offshore federally managed waters of the EEZ. This is our landings estimate. It basically is a dockside survey on this side, effort survey or your fishing activity. Those two things together make our landing estimate. I'm going to now go into each part of those so that you can understand each one of those sections. So the first one we're going to talk about is the dockside. You may see it on here listed as access point. It's the same thing. It's that dockside survey. So the dockside survey are the ones that when you're coming from your fishing trip and you see a biologist at the dock, that's what I mean by the dockside survey. That we are getting harvest rates by private inshore, private offshore, charter inshore, and charter offshore. This is a map of our survey sites. These are all the sites that we have that could possibly be drawn, and you could be interviewed by one of our biologists. We do our estimates by basin. So each one of these is basically a field office that we have, except for offshore, that we will derive estimates for. So we have Pontchartrain, Barataria, Terrebonne, Vermilion Teche, and Calcasieu. How our assignments are done. So our assignment draw is done by each site in those basins are evaluated by our field staff. They are evaluated monthly, and they determine the relative pressure or the number of trips we'll typically see at those sites. They will look at those sites, like what they expect to see for a weekday or what they expect to see for a weekend. They will also give us numbers based on what activity is going on. So again, that private inshore, private offshore, charter inshore, charter offshore. Those weekly pressures are then down to the area fish. Like we'll look at them based on the basin that those apply to. Those site pressures encourage representative dockside sampling. High pressure sites are drawn more than low pressure sites. After we do those draws, we then divvy them up to all of our field offices, which is the CSAs, the Coastal Study Area Offices. Some of the data that we collect, the dockside survey is conducted with a biologist at the dock, like I mentioned a minute ago. Returning boats or shore anglers are asked questions about their fishing trip. So the information we collect, number of anglers on the trip, where the anglers fished, number of species of fish caught. This is an example of what our dockside form looks like. A thing to know is we do collect biological data as well. It is not part of LaCreel. It is a separate program, but we will collect biodata if the biologist has the opportunity to. During red snapper season, however, we are intensively collecting biological data along with LaCreel. Here's are just the questions that you'll get asked the doc. Most of the time, you probably don't realize that you're even asked these questions because our biologists are pretty good about having that conversation with you while you're packing up for the day. So we'll ask you what fishing activity you were involved in, how many anglers were fishing, how many of those anglers had a license. If it's a charter captain, it's just if the charter captain has a license. How many of those anglers had an ROLP? Again, if it's the charter captain, did he have an ROLP? Was it a fishing tournament? What species did you target on your trip? And then the area of the area of majority of your harvest or your time spent fishing. So if you didn't catch any fish, then we'll ask you where you spent most of your time fishing. If you did catch fish, you'll tell us where you caught those fish. And then finally, we ask to see your fish. We will count whatever you will show us. They will touch your fish. If you don't, we will still record what you have reported to us. And then we will also get information on a suite of species for discards. And we will record that information by species, totals, and the type of disposition it is. Was it reported? Was it counted? Was it a discard? So the dockside tells us the angler's average harvest rate for all species of fish caught within that basin. The catch rates from the higher activity sites are weighted in the final harvest rate calculations so that they are more influential than the harvest rates captured at scarcely frequented sites. Dockside surveys also give us the license compliant rate, which is used to increase the effort estimate to include anglers that are not in the license frame. And these are just those formulas that we use. So the harvest rate's basically the total number of fish harvested by that party over the total number of anglers in that party. And then we have the compliance rates as well for private angler and charter. So some examples of data from that. This is 2023. Our biologists worked 1,608 assignments. Of that, 10,675 fishing parties were interviewed, which is 28,612 anglers that we interviewed in 2023. And 86,791 fish were counted by our biologists. This graph here is basically the catch per unit effort by basin. As you can see, most people know most of our fishing activity occurs in Barataria. So now that I've discussed dockside, I'm going to move to effort. Effort, again, is your fishing activity. Not really what you caught. We want to know when you went fishing. So that effort is the email or phone survey that you'll get during a week. And we break it up by regions. So our effort calls, we have divided the state up into north, southwest, southeast, and we have out of state, and we have ROLP, which is your offshore universe. So the effort survey is conducted through an email or a phone survey. If the email is not answered by a given date, we will start calling. The information we collect, how many fishing trips the angler took throughout that week, which days they fished, and where the angler fished. How we do our draw is we will draw 300 from each of those regions, but the ROLP is 400. From our license frame, we'll randomly draw that many from each region. So it's 1,600 license holders that are called every week. Right now during red snapper season, we double that ROLP number, so it's 800. And this is for the private anglers only. So that's 2,000 that are called every week during red snapper season. For the charter frame, it's a different survey. It is basically ROLP, non-ROLP. And I'm going to discuss the charter survey a little bit more in detail in a minute. So for that private angler effort survey, basically the questions you're asked: did you fish last week? If you didn't, your survey's done. If you did, we're going to ask you what days you went fishing. And then, did you fish from a boat? Were you on a paid charter trip? Which basin did you catch most of your fish in? Or where did you spend most of your time fishing? What time did you get back to the dock? And then, did you come back to a site that is open to the general public? So basically private or public launch. And then, do you have an ROLP? Here's some of the numbers that we have, just showing you our frame. For the surveys, we attempted 97,600 contacts last year. Our completion rate is about 50%. We reached 50%. We completed 6,433 surveys by email and almost 42,000 by phone. So here's a breakdown. You can see, again, like I mentioned earlier, the Southeast tends to be our bigger fishing group. This is just a breakdown of our number of anglers by the region type. And I can come back to any of these once we get done, if you want to look at it further. For the charter survey, these surveys are conducted by our field offices. We will send out an email to the charter captains if we have their email on Monday morning. If they don't answer the email by Wednesday, it's similar, we start calling them. The information that we collect during a charter survey is basically very similar to the private anglers. The date their charter fishing trip took place, the number of anglers they had on the trip, the basin in which they spent the majority of their time or harvest, and then whether the trip ended at a public or private site. If it's red snapper season, we'll ask them 2 additional questions: whether or not they have a federal reef fish permit, and if they harvested red snapper. And this is just an example of what that charter call form looks like. So for charters, we attempted 6,282 contacts. Our completion rate with charters is about 62%. 834 of those were completed by email and 3,045 were completed by phone. So last year you saw we had 900 charter captains in the program, and most of them are non-ROLP holders. I guess I should say too, let me back up. During red snapper season, we call 100% of our ROLP list during the whole season. So the ROLP captains get called every week during snapper season. So, sorry, keep going. Oh, sorry. So now that you have seen private and charter, how is this effort data calculated? The effort survey gives us the number of trips taken by private anglers and charters. So the mean effort per angler over the number of anglers interviewed times the number of licensed anglers gives us our estimated number of trips. So this is just a graph showing you how much of that effort is from private anglers and how much is from charters. So why do we have two separate surveys? That we get that question asked of us a lot. Why is effort data not collected dockside? We have a potential for double counting if an angler is interviewed multiple times during that week. Dockside interviews do not establish the proportion of anglers that did not fish during the week. Dockside interviews would miss any night or private launch effort. And the focus of our dockside interviews is to estimate the catch rates. A reminder that Creel is an estimate survey, not a census survey. Another question, why don't you ask me about my catch during the effort survey? We want to keep the survey quick by asking only about the number of trips taken in the previous week. Recalling which species and how many fish caught on each trip during a week can be difficult for the casual angler. Do you remember if that was Monday or Tuesday that you caught that? A biologist identifying fish dockside removes confusion over regional names for fish and validates that species harvested. The effort survey is focused on characterizing weekly fishing effort. So now that I've explained the dockside survey and the effort survey, those two things come together to give you your total landings estimate. Those total landing estimates are by area fished, effort type, and species. So for 2023, here's our estimate of landings just for some popular species. As you can see, sea trout is our big guy. Red drum is about 14%. Red snapper going on right now is about 3%. Where you can look at this on our website. You can pull harvest estimates, you can pull effort data. You can look at it by whatever time period you'd like. You can look at it by different fishing activities. You can look at it by, if you wanted to look at just charter, you could look at just charter. If you wanted to look at just private angler, you could look at private angler. If you wanted to see what it looked like this June compared to last June, you could do that as well. And then efforts the same way. You can look at it monthly, annually, and by fishing activity or fishing area. But it is on our website and it's updated monthly. And then this is the big one we get asked about a lot. This is our current red snapper landings estimates as of last week. And we'll come back to this in a few minutes. But basically that is our presentation.